Welcome to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have a TikTok creator. He goes by the name of ExmoJoe on TikTok. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here. Thank you very much.
Plus, I know that's vodka. Go ahead and show the audience what.
I told you not to tell anybody. Tell them it's water.
Or it could be your still, right?
Right, that's right. It's from the distillery.
Yeah,
from the water distillery.
All right.
Yeah, I'm at my new account. I have an old account. I don't know if that's still discoverable, but my new account is with underscores for spaces in case anybody goes looking for me. Is it's ExmoJoe. So
and
that's the one you want to find.
I'll actually provide a link in the description, and I don't know how many people go to the description. Also in the description is like a tip jar for me and Maven when we're on, whatever. And I don't think I've had a tip yet come in.
Oh, yeah? I'll send you.
So just for fun, everybody who watches this, go to the description and look for the links that we have for ExmoJoe and see if there's anybody that's, I'll dare somebody, right, to send Maven or I a tip. Now, Maven doesn't tell me if she might have like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know. And just is not telling me. But
right. I've heard that.
Because if I was going to tip, I wouldn't tip me. I would tip Maven anyway. And everybody, if you want to just tip Maven, let's see if we get up to 10 tips for Maven today. But anyway,
$1,000.
So we like to start our show by giving like a 5-minute overview of your life leading to some important event, like maybe graduating from college or something like that, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
And you can include not your favorite primary song, but just how you interacted with the church growing up, teacher's quorum president or any of those things that, shows people how you were on a track to become, an apostle someday.
Right. I mean, I think just by my very appearance, you can tell that was the Bruce R. McConkie track is what I was on. I mean, obviously. Okay, so I was born in Colorado and mostly raised in Arizona. I was a Mesa Mormon kid. Hated church when I was a kid, but went all the time. Born in the Covenant, and a little bit shy and weird, which is the words they used in the 80s and 90s. Sorry, when I grew up, that's the word you used.
Once they stopped calling you retard or something like that,
right? Well, frankly, yeah. I mean, frankly, yes. That's exactly. Well, it was the word before they knew to use autism.
Yeah, they were terms of endearment.
Right. Yeah, and it's amazing how that stigma lasts even till today. Because I was working with a guy, and I'm like, well, my son has autism. I have a pre-verbal son who is he's 9 now. And doesn't really use many words. It's like a couple dozen words, and that's it. And but he's a brilliant boy, and he's like, well, and this Mormon guy that I was working with, who's not particularly sharp at the time, he was a sweet boy. He's a sweet man. He's an older man, retired, and just working this as a side job. And he says to me, "Oh, well, they go straight to heaven." And I was like, "Autistic people?" Oh. And he's like, well, yeah, because they're sweet and innocent like children. And I'm like, oh no, that's not.
You're just
you have the wrong idea.
You're not down deep enough.
Well, I mean, really, autistic people. Yeah. Well, yes, neurodiverse or neurospicy is like a popular thing to say now. Neurospicy, but people with autism generally are not cognitively in a different place than most people their age. We're mostly anywhere on the spectrum. We're just socially impaired and or our nervous systems are just overwhelmed, and they still don't know entirely how it happens, but more is coming out every day, which including that basically high anxiety and or ADHD is part of the same spectrum. It's all part of this neurodiverse spectrum.
In a way, I used to joke that I thought autistic people were like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, artistic instead of autistic, because I'm mishearing it. But probably
they were. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Michelangelo, definitely. Leonardo da Vinci, probably. My favorite.
ADHD, he can concentrate on making inventions that everybody thought was crazy at the time.
Right. Well, I mean,
Design.
including, yeah, I mean, for more or less for fun, Leonardo da Vinci made weapons, designed weapons that brutally demonstrated, how you can mutilate whole crowds of people, and that's something that, you don't have to be autistic to, you could be a sadist, or you could just be a person who loves war. But if you are autistic, you're going to sit there and you can draw. You're going to sit there and let's draw machines for killing people. There you go. Page 1. So page 2, machines to kill people. So I mean,
weird things. You do weird. Talk about being weird. You do it where you write it in the mirror backwards. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that how he did his notes or whatever?
Yeah. The rumor is that like his notebooks, he would hit some of on the left-hand side that they were written backwards. I don't know if that's true, but then people said that that's because he would write with both hands at the same time or something like that.
Right. So you didn't create any Sistine Chapels or anything when you were young, but you got in
painted
trouble
this wild shit. But that's been this year. So I was always an artist, though. I always drew, and now I have 3 children who are all artists, and I'm like, I hate to tell you this, kids.
On your peachy book covers?
On my what?
The book covers. Like you get a book from school and they say, "Don't damage."
Oh yeah.
Here's how you make a paper cover. So you didn't like things?
No, never did things like that. I had secret books. I had secret sketchbooks. Some of them because they were my book, and sometimes they were my little notepads for drawing boobs. I was like, that stage, and then like destroy it before my mom finds it. And then but then for the most part, like I remember when I was really small, I decided I was going to impress my mom and design a temple and draw a temple. So I drew it out I drew out all the windows, and I put this big dome on it and a big spire and a big and then a cross on the top of the steeple, and then blah blah blah, and did all this. And she looked at it and she said, "What is it, Joey?" And I was like, "But it's a temple." And she said, "Why does it have a cross?" That was like the first comment. "We don't do that, son. We don't do that." And it was like,
you were ahead of your time. I bet you before 2050, I'll say, you'll probably be alive still. There will be crosses on temples. Maybe even by 2035. That's my prediction.
I'm always shocked when I see Mormons wearing crosses all of a sudden. I'm like, how did I get into Bizarro World?
I have this idea that once the church decided to honor Palm Sunday last spring and talk about it, like a few people mentioned it. This is Palm Sunday. It's like we never even were allowed to utter Catholic holidays when I was a kid, right? And I started thinking they're gunning to rename the church the Mormon Catholic Church, like Roman Catholic, Mormon Catholic. It kind of rolls off the tongue really well. But
I mean, this whole rebranding to Christian, has been quite interesting because, like, I remember when I was still Mormon, thinking we really ought to lean harder into the whole "we are Christians" thing, like really emphasize the similarities we have inside this community before we let the Christians just continue to tell our story for us.
Mormons aren't Christian. Like, how can we not be Christian with the name Jesus Christ in our name?
Right. And that was the thing, is that, like, for me, I was always like, that was what they would say. Of course, we're Christians. We have Jesus Christ in the name of the church. I'm like, yeah, but we hardly use it. Number one. And number two, anybody can call their church a Church of Jesus Christ. They ought to be leaning into, we believe in grace. We do believe in grace, and we do believe in faith, and we do believe in Jesus's, the passion of the Christ and things like that, and build more bridges that way. But back then we weren't about that. Now they get to do stuff like that. I'm not going to say I'm jealous, but it's a different world.
That's okay. So we talked about, tell us about your pre-mission life in the church.
So at 14, I've told this story elsewhere, so I don't know how much you want me to get into it, but I was in a homeschool group called Benjamin Franklin Academy. It was started by the son-in-law of Cleon Skousen, a man by the name of Dr. Glenn Kimber. And our texts were all Cleon Skousen's books. So our world history started at 4000 BCE with Adam and Eve and the creation. We had hook dates we learned, which I am grateful for every day, because now whenever I have conversations with people, I know all of the dates of biblical history on the narrative of young earth creationism, right? I learned all that, and I found I was pretty good at it, considering that I didn't really buy into Mormonism very well, and kind of for secretly several times wondered to myself, I wonder if when I grow up and move away, if I can get out of this church and do, and live a life that felt more authentic to me, because it definitely felt.
Was your family like a cult within a cult?
Yeah, well, we were kind of like the Ezra Taft Benson Mormons,
Right.
Right. Well, like none of us, like my mother was raised. Yeah. My mother was raised very Democrat, and very, she was raised by a Mexican family from Magna, Utah here. And her father was like a union rep for like the Kennecott Union, I think, or something like that. It was something like that. And then she married my dad and went full on beyond, who was a Republican guy from a Republican family up in Lewiston, Utah, and went full on the other way. I went with my mother to an Eagle Forum meeting. The name John Birch wasn't said, but everything the John Birch Society did and said and believed was, got passed around, right? So
was part of the Eagle Forum, was that remnants of Howard Ruff?
I don't really know.
Do you know the name Howard Ruff? He was like a soft, what do you call the people that have like a 3-year supply and ammunition and maybe a gas tank in their backyard?
Preppers? Nazis?
Yeah, preppers. He was like a soft prepper. He was like, if you're going to have food supply, it should taste good. And here's a company that has good tasting, supply of food and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
I think it's probably more recent. I remember when I've worked in the MLM business for several years as a video producer. And I remember it was about the time when they started making MLMs that made 1 year supplies, so that all your Mormon congregation could be your Mormon downline. I went, I got to get out of this business. I already was anxious to get out, but I was like, man, I got to get out of this business. It's become Mormon LLC now. It's so much.
So do we finish, or do we go off when you said you were 14?
So I was 14, and
you're in the school.
And I got an opportunity. I was selected by my little group, our little homeschool group, to represent the school and going to a meeting in Salt Lake City where Cleon Skousen was speaking. And that was, you remember Cleon Skousen, for Skousenites. We were
almost like the prophet of this little group.
That's right.
I remember reading the first 1,000 years.
Right. That was our first textbook. Our civics textbook was the 5,000-year leap. So anyways, and so I was honored, and I went and he was speaking at this meeting. We were in a chapel, in an LDS chapel, and they put up on broadcast on the screen, the general conference screen with the projector. They put up a video for us to watch. Cleon Skousen, he came out and says, most of you kids don't know this, but I used to be the chief of police in Salt Lake, or the sheriff or something in Salt Lake County. And he's like, he didn't tell us that he got shit canned from that job. That's okay. Sorry for swearing on your program. Sorry about that, Jane. But yeah, so, and he showed us a video, and the video he showed us was the interview that Ted Bundy did with James C. Dobson hours before he was sent to the electric chair. And basically, if you know that interview, basically it's the interview where he says, I was a good, upstanding citizen, Christian boy, living the gospel, living the rules, to the man who is the founder of Focus on the Family, right? I mean, it's like the evangelical. This guy's out there, okay, right wing. But obviously, Bundy was trying to get another stay. He knew that the guy was close to the governor of Florida, and that hoping they could get another stay of execution. And then he says, basically, and then it was softcore porn that threw me off, and gory detective novels, and he said, and from there I couldn't help myself, and which is just, this is all of James C. Dobson's dreams come true. The sinner, the devil speaks, and tells us the truth of what's happening. He's playing right into it.
If Ted Bundy had been born 40 years later, he would have said he played video games online and
Call of Duty,
and that caused him to do all the things that are bad.
Right, and use TikTok and post on TikTok and things like this, right?
Right.
And so, he was playing the game. He knew exactly what he was doing, right? And so he went to, and he's like, and then he says, but then you people here, you in this modern age, you all have cable television being pumped into your homes with HBO. The things your children are able to see on cable television, and then you take them shopping, and there are these rows of Good Housekeeping and Red Book and People magazine, these scantily clad women. He's like, I don't know how these kids aren't becoming the next Ted Bundy, every single one of them. And there was not a dry eye in the room. And I came out of that, people praised me before that as a good Mormon boy. In my heart of hearts, I didn't feel like it was true, because I had serious doubts about the church. And but I was good at playing the part of a good Peter Priesthood young deacon, and teacher. At that point, I was a teacher. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I am really lost. I am going to be the next Ted Bundy. Who knows how long it is before I just start murdering women? I mean, I can't be in control of myself. And so that's when I realized I needed God. And that, plus I had a really bad temper, which I still have. The church laments over that. So it was at that point that I decided I needed to go to my bishop and confess to him that I had committed the sin next to murder, namely stealing the bra and panty section out of the Mervyn's catalog when I went on Sundays. Because we didn't have Playboy. If my dad had porn in the house, he sure hid it well, because I doubt I sure as hell wouldn't have found it. Not that my dad would do that, but I went to the bishop and I confessed that I had a little bit of a habit, and he looked very distressed, and he said, Brother Rollins, this really disturbs me. I think we need to get your parents involved in this. And I was like, whoa, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, I said, I thought anything said in here was like in confidence. And he's like, oh, it is. He's like, but this is a serious problem. You're going to need a support structure to kick this habit. I'm like, we were not bringing my mother into this. I have a hard enough time guiding it from her as it is. And then from there, it became a real quest. I've talked about that a little bit. It was a bit of a traumatizing experience confessing to that bishop, to be honest with you. Not at any fault of his. He was a cattle rancher from Mesa, Arizona. And he actually asked
what everybody was feeding him from the top.
He told me, I can tell you, Brother Rollins, that this is a thing that nobody else in this, as a judge in Israel, nobody in this congregation is suffering with this kind of affliction like you are.
Wow.
So and you were the one. I was the one. I was bringing down the curve in Mesa, Arizona, man. The only masturbator around. And then I remembered. And then he reaches into his desk and pulls out a pamphlet from top, a little blue pamphlet from top of a big stack of pamphlets that's titled "To Young Men Only." And I remember looking at in that drawer and saying, "Is there to young women only?" I definitely didn't need that thought in my head, though. But there was not a stack of to young women only.
That's right. You learned that you had a little factory.
That's right. That's the little factory talk. Boyd K. Packer. You're lucky you're dead, motherfucker. Anyway, so so from there I became in earnest saved. I had my salvation experience. In the Core Horror Argument, my book about my mission, I talk about, I had a vision when I repented of my sins and gave all my anger away to God, gave all my sins to God, and said, if you'll help me to resist these terrible habits I have, I will give my whole life to you. I'll serve a mission. I'll do it all, which I mean, I was expected to. I knew that, my father was a missionary, his father was a missionary, etc. And, and so then from that point on, though, I felt like I was a true convert to the true gospel of Jesus Christ. And I saw it all in my head. I could see it all. I could see, the mission of the prophets from the creation up through the apostles and Jesus and the restoration, Joseph Smith and the Book of Mormon. I saw it all and I believed it all very passionately. And from that point on,
you're going to help the restored church, like a stone cut out from a mountain without hands, fill the earth. You were going to help that happen. You were an army member, a soldier for Jesus.
That's right. A soldier in the army of the Lord, a Christian soldier. Yeah, absolutely. All that. And beyond that, because I'm a Mexican American on my mother's side, I was the son of the Lamanites. I was part of the grand prophecy of restoring the lost tribes of Israel.
That's right. You were a white Lamanite. That's
right. That's right. And so there was, well, depending on if it was summer. If it's summer, I get very Lamanite. So, but then by the time I was 19, I was the kid people talked about when they said, when they go on a mission, this young generation, they will mount up on wings as eagles. They say, like Joe Rollins, for example. I mean, Fat Boys, and I didn't realize at the time how much my ego had inflated with that. I also didn't realize that the existential crises that I thought that God had put out of my life were there constantly being suppressed. Every time I felt depressed, every time I felt like this life wasn't working out for me, and a lot of that has to do with autism. I come to find out now we know that. I thought God cured me of this, and I every time I have this thought, I am betraying my Savior. I'm betraying the atonement by even thinking about this. And so it's just suppressing.
Suffer more.
That's right. I'm causing Christ. Yeah, that's exactly the thought. It well, I guess.
So the guilt of not wanting to cause Christ to suffer more helped you keep from sinning?
Well, and yes, from general sinning of the variety I've already spoken of, but also that I thought that a great sin was thinking about hurting myself or killing myself or quitting this life, and which by the time I was 11 years old, I had become more or less obsessed with. I would ruminate, and we call it now, passive ideation is another common term for it, right? But although the medical term, I guess, is now treatment-resistant depression. But they didn't have any of those words in 1994. I can tell you that, and through 1999. So, but I thought I'd been cured of whatever this was. And nobody was going to tell me at that point in time that my grandparents all had depression, my mother's side and my father's side. My pioneer ancestors, there's long history of depression, the Mormon pioneers, that depression was a gift not only from my mother, but also from my father and from all of their ancestors. I was doomed. The depression had it in for me from the bang, and I just thought it was just me being wicked, me succumbing to the demons of Satan like hitting me on the head. That's an inside joke, but anyway. So by the time I'm in 1999, I graduated from high school, and I submitted my papers to go on a mission for the church. By that point in time, I was certain that my patriarchal blessing was true, and that specifically said I was going to be called to bring people into the fold who would not be found unless I found them. And I was like, and I felt certain in my heart, I'm like, I'll be okay if it turns out not to be this, but it's going to be to return to the Lamanites, to my Lamanite to the people, my pueblo, my people, the Lamanite ancestry, which I never bought into the Heartland model, which, there was no Ron Meldrum that I knew of back then. When I was a kid, I knew Joseph Allen. My father was business partners with Joseph Allen, who was the guy who wrote the book Exploring the Lands of the Book of Mormon, and that was basically Farm's Mesoamerica theory. He basically manufactured what we know now as the Mesoamerica theory. And he and I actually hit it off really well when I was a teenager. We were actually, I don't know about close friends, but we got along. And but when I got my mission call, I wish I had that out. I have that around here somewhere. As a matter of fact, I see the box it's in, but I'm not going to go hunting for it. When Gordon B. Hinckley called me to the Peru Lima North mission, that's it. Going to get these Lamanite brothers. We're going to bring them to Christ, man. This is the fulfillment of the prophecy. I was 100% certain of it. And it took me about 6 months to 8 months in the field before I was ready to just admit to myself that I was miserable. And the more people I taught, the more doors I knocked on, the more companions I wanted to actually knock their lights out. The more that I lived in the mission field, is the more I didn't know how God could be real, and how the faith that I was selling Catholics on Mormonism, it didn't seem to me like arguing with them about Catholicism, that Catholicism offered them anything better or offered me anything better. And I looked at it and thought, as a matter of fact, the more that I look at this, the more these doubts from way back before the Ted Bundy conversion, way back before then, these doubts started to emerge in my head. And the first of them, the oldest, I told Stephen Pinecker this. I said, if you want my advice, Mormons want my advice to stay in the church, get that oldest doubt off your shelf. Get it down and work on it, because that's the one that shows up. That was my story, the oldest doubt. And I thought forever that doubt was the 116 pages. I'm like, oh my gosh, this Book of Lehi story. I mean, every time I thought about it, I was like, people know this story? It's just like the South Park episode. People know this story and stay in the church? It's like, what? It's so obvious. But then when I got my doubts, when my doubts turned existential, when it started to come down to my thinking about, I don't know that it's not just that I don't know whether or not I'm long for this church. I don't know how I'm long for this world, because it just seems to me like it has nothing. Religion certainly doesn't. God certainly doesn't seem to have anything to offer when I am depressed. Well, I didn't want to say the word depressed. That was a sin. And so it's like, but when I get these dark, low moods, it's like I can't cope. I just can't cope with this world. And it was,
Did you think
it must have been all the time. That it was that, the third.
Was that another thing that made you feel like you were a choice? Because if Satan has so many demons after you, you must be one hell of a missionary.
Because I'm a priesthood holder. I'm a righteous steward in the Lord's garden. And so, of course,
Satan's the Lord bring you down.
That's right. This vineyard's got to have no priesthood holders. That's why, and this was the thing that they used to say back then, that's why God had to institute polygamy, because Satan wants the men more because we're priesthood holders. And so he knows that in order to get families into the celestial kingdom, you got to get more women in per man. So, of course, obviously, he knows he's got to institute polygamy. But the things we used to say.
It's gestational conversion.
Right. That's a way of putting it.
We need to grow Mormons more than we need to go farm for them.
Right. And we got to get these women saved. And if they don't have the equipment to save each other, well, then they got to share. They got to learn to share. So
did you last your full mission?
I did. Yeah. Served full 2-year mission. But I was saying that the doubt that emerged to me first was Korihor. That's when I realized, no, even older than the 116 pages. Because I remember the day I really learned about the 116 pages. And I thought, oh boy, I'm shutting that out of my mind. I didn't need that. Why did they tell us that story? Oh my gosh, I didn't need that. I was 11 years old. It was in what was called Webelos at the time. Now, then they called it 11-year-old scouts, and then et cetera. And I remember the presentation was not great, but the story was not good no matter how you present it. But then I remember thinking, no, I remember when I heard that, I thought, I am trying hard not to think about Korihor all the time. And now this guy put this in my head about these lost pages of the book of Lehi. And I'm like, because I realized then I have been, every time I read the Book of Mormon, I skipped Alma chapter 30. I'd get 2, 3, 4 verses in and go, I got to come back to this. And I would skip to the end of it and move on, because it was when I was a kid and I read the story of Korihor and I went, he wins. He's right. Alma proves him right. And then he's shut up forever. He's shut up for the rest of his life by being condemned to not be able to speak. And then he's shut up forever by God killing him. And I remember thinking, is that what that is? When you speak, when you dare to speak up and point out that this isn't logical. This is logically incongruent. Is that what it is? God shuts you up forever? And I just thought, and so much of my life, I didn't realize until I was on my mission, thinking about doing what, there's a phrase we used to say, I forget who said it originally. They'd say, you don't come home from your mission except in a pine box. And right. and I remember thinking that over and over again. This is me. I thought I was going to return with honor. It turns out I may go into that bathroom right now and return in a pine box. And I thought about it like all the time. And I thought, but you never even hear about missionaries who do that. Am I the only one? Is it back to the young? Should they have it to young men, to young missionaries only, so that it's like me and the right? If you find yourself on the path to coming home in a pine box, it turns out you have depression. So here's what we, the church, are going to do about it. Not a damn thing. So anyways, but at the same time, it's only since I've become a grown man that I realized I can go back introspectively, learned meditation, and been able to look inside and say to myself, okay, but Joe, you were also an autistic person who didn't know that's what that was, because nobody knew that's what that was. And could have said to somebody, I need help because I am depressed. But autistic people don't tend to do that. And we didn't know that then. I didn't know that. So it's strange that part of the healing for me since I left the church or was excommunicated has been learning to forgive the church, actually, interestingly enough, and to forgive God. Oh, it took me a long time to forgive God before I came to the realization that, to not exist is just about the most innocent thing in the world. But I'm here being angry at a being that doesn't exist. And the feeling feels valid until you've logically processed it and realize how stupid that is. And then suddenly it was a huge burden. There was a grieving process for me with God. I don't know your position on this, but
so you're saying I shouldn't be mad at unicorns for anything that they've done to wreak havoc on the world?
I will never say that. We all need to be deeply concerned about that. And frankly, the war on the unicorns is yet to begin. But God, we can leave out of it.
I tell people, I don't believe in unicorns, but nobody ever accuses me of being an unicornist. Right.
Sam Harris had said that, and he got into.
Oh, he did.
Got quite a tip about that. He was like, "Why don't we?" Because he was at an atheist conference, and he said, "Why do we have these conferences? What do we as atheists believe? What do we as atheists do?" Which there are some atheists who feel passionately about, you don't point out the fact that we as atheists have like zero common values. We just all happen to love outer space, which is more probably about our being neurospicy. We all are, some shade of polyamorous, but that also probably has more to do with that neurospicy thing. It's like there's all these things. Like if you have a strong logic processing mind, and especially with a little bit of neurodivergence, atheism may be for you. Which is just to say, not even to say that you believe there is no God. As Korihor said, he said, I did not say I do not believe in that. I did not say there is no God, but that I do not believe in God. And except thou shalt show unto me a sign. I will, yea, show unto me that he hath power. I will not believe. So of course, what does Alma do? Show him that God has power. And he gave up the argument. He concedes the argument. And so, hence why I called my book about my deconversion, on my mission in Peru, where I was very lonely and depressed. I called it the Korihor argument. I realized Korihor was right. And the church didn't write that story, but boy, did that story write the church. I mean, that's the way we talk about people who will listen to critics of the church. It's like, oh, he's a Korihor. And then the way they talk about Korihor, there's a great article, not great, it's a stupid article by Gerald Lund, the author, the Mormon author, wrote the Work in the Glory series and all that, on the church's website, deconstructing the philosophy of Korihor. And he talks about Korihor as a very cunning and crafty philosopher who has the philosophies of men so adeptly, figured out. But then he goes over why Korihor is wrong, and the argument is phenomenally bad. It's like, oh, no wonder Alma lost. There's nobody in this Mormon movement who has any way of countering Korihor. And it all started with the person who wrote the story of Korihor. So who is that? Who is that's the thing that really bothered me. It's like, who sat down and said, okay, I'm going to do this. We're going to make this story about a great debate between an atheist and a believer.
Man of God.
Right? And a man of God, a prophet of God, the greatest missionary. Not only that, but it wasn't until I reviewed it, I realized he's not even the first person that confronts Korihor. Ammon, with the 202 arms, 200 arms, 2,000 arms, whatever it was, the arms of the thieves. That Ammon says that they arrested him, which was against the law, according to the Book of Mormon. According to that Alma 30, they arrest him for his beliefs, and Korihor presents to him his argument, which is sound. And it says, Ammon answered him not a word and sent him
You got me.
to the next guy. Got me. Above my pay grade, and so he basically extradites him to a neighboring land called Gideon, where the judge is Gidona, who challenges him and says, why do you say that there is no God, that there will be no Christ? And which all these people are so looking forward to in our faith. And Korihor gives him the argument again, and he just wags his head and does the most Mormon answer ever. And he's like, he basically says, "You make me sad," and then he extradites him to Zarahemla. Up the pay grade, man. I can't handle this. So you got two prominent leaders in Nephite culture who are like, yeah, I can't, you got me there, and I just don't want to think about it. So off you go. You can see how when the first time you read this story, I don't know how anybody reads the story and goes, are we going to address the fact that nobody has an answer for this guy? And then Alma argues with him and phenomenally loses the debate. I mean, his epistemology is all over the place. And what's impressive, if you look at it, I charted this out in my book. Korihor actually does go over all of his points again and again, just like you would in a Lincoln-Douglas debate, which I was the Lincoln-Douglas debate, not very good, but I was the best debater in my school and the head of the team for my school. And when the first time after my mission that I went back and reviewed this again, I'm like, this is why this bothered me. is that Korihor restates all of his points again and again, and they're all solid. They are solid epistemology. And, but the point comes down to, for Alma, that it does also for Gerald Lund. And he says it's all based on, and Jacob Hansen is right in the same vein. The first base of his philosophy is axiomatic, meaning the moral values of the person arguing. So right off the bat, in logic, this is a fallacy known as ad hominem, right? To attack the man. And so right off the bat, we're leaning into screw logic. We're leaning into, if this philosophy is so righteous and you are so logical, why are you such a bad person? And it was like, wait a minute, in the logic game, that's got nothing to bear. That can't be part of the equation, the arguing of the person, because you could take all of his philosophy and put it in the mind of a perfectly moral person, and it still follows. If it follows, it follows. And so I'm like, and all of the challenges to Korihor are always start with this. Oh, he caused women and also the men. And that's the way it's written in the Book of Mormon. It caused also many women and also men to commit whoredoms. It's like, who were they committing whoredoms with before the men were part? Okay. And so it's like, and so everything was about attacking Korihor on his values, and then coming around and telling him, you make me sad. And then he has an argument that's called in Calvinism, particularly, it's called presuppositionalism, which is the argument that the Bible says that every person is born with the word of God written on the fleshy tablet of their heart. And so every person who says he's an atheist is a liar, is because they all know that God exists. They know it in their bones. They know it in their heart. And Korihor makes that, or Alma makes that argument to Korihor. It's like, I know you believe.
I've heard a lot of good Christians, so they say that they were praying and God wrote on their heart that Jesus was the Christ, and that they should follow Jesus, and that maybe they got a mission in their life to spread the word, right? Mm-hmm. So really they should say, I prayed and God allowed me to see what already was written in my heart.
Yes, if they believe in presuppositionalism, because there are Christians who don't. There are Christians who know.
So you're saying it would be just the Calvinists that would be sort of like, I saw what was written on my heart already.
That's where I've mostly seen it. I can't say that I know that's particularly attached to Calvinism. I will have to look into that. But those are the ones I know.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing, that the presupposition.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and it's such a cop-out answer. Oh, I don't believe you. I know for a fact because my book says so. Says that you believe me.
Because you could say, if we start out with this pen created the universe and created all the morals,
there you go,
then everything else follows after that. The same as when Jacob says it, so
right.
How can Jacob tell me the difference between this pen and God then, if I just claim the same thing?
Right. Bingo. And especially if the pen goes around and creates itself eventually. It's called circular logic. It's called circular reasoning.
I call it Vic logic, but whatever.
That's fine. We'll have to change it. That's much better. That's good. That's good. So yeah. So lost my faith. Couldn't tell anybody while I was in Peru. Sure, I couldn't tell my mission president. Couldn't tell my parents.
But you still, even if you've lost your faith, you still have to go find a Mormon bride and get married in the temple.
It's a good question. I didn't believe in the church, and I didn't believe in God anymore, for sure, at the end of my mission. When I came home, I felt certain that I would come around on it, that it would come back to me. I mean, I had it so strong.
You still have the faith to lead a Mormon life, even if you don't believe in it.
I sure thought so. And so I started dating a girl the night I was released from my mission call, a girl that had written to me at the end of my mission, who had gotten married to a man who was not Mormon, while I was on my mission. And we were friends. I didn't really particularly, think that we were destined to be together, but I tried not to think about that about any girls because I was going to go on a mission.
Right.
But she started writing to me, and she told me about her marriage and things. And and she started to write to me and tell me, Joe, I'm going to be honest with you. My marriage isn't going well. This man is abusive of me. He's not, he doesn't treat me well. And I would write to her, and I was like, I feel for you. I wish I were there to be, but whatever way I can be.
That empathy.
Yeah. Right. And then when I got home from my mission was, I think, the day she submitted her divorce papers to him. And then we started hanging out, and I thought, this is it. The Lord sent me a wife. The conversion that I couldn't get on a mission came in my bed in the form of a good friend who I had always been attracted to, but I never really thought of as, wife, as my wife. We were just friends. And her family, her parents and I were very close. And still, I mean, we haven't talked in a long time, but we still are. I still love these people dearly, dearly love them. And they started talking about me, like people would call me their son-in-law. And, oh, Joe, he's the future son-in-law of these two people. And her sisters and brothers were all about, everything fit, everything worked out. Here she was, she had married a non-Mormon. She had made mistakes, but she was repenting and moving on with her life. I had been the return missionary. I got this knight in shining armor thing going for me. And it's like, I've been sent to her and she's been sent to me. And we are going to love each other and have babies, lots of Mormon babies. I'll be an apostle. Or getting back on track. I had my moments. I had my Korahor doubts. But I'm going to get back on track. Until I was with her one night. We were talking. We were
studying scriptures.
Right. That's correct. That's right. We were sharing the word of God. And the word God was sermon. And no, we tried very hard to be very good. And I'm like, and I don't remember exactly how the conversation went, but it was something along the lines of, why don't we get married? I mean, you want it, I want it, your parents, the family thinks it. She's like, your mom doesn't want it. She's like, I'm like, that's my mom. My mom hates all girls equally. And I'm like,
no girl is good enough for my Joe.
That's it. It is exactly that way. Yeah. Yeah. That trope turns out true in the case of my mom.
And you've been pen pals for all this time. You know each other. We
were pen pals the last few months of my mission, but yes. I mean, no, that's not true. That's not true. She wrote to me my whole mission. Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Now I'm remembering her out, and some of her letters are in that box right there. And we're still very close. It wasn't until 2024 this year. Was it last year or this year? It was the beginning of this year. She messaged me on Facebook. We didn't get married. Spoiler alert. And she contacted me and she said, Joe, you're not going to believe this. And I'm like, what? And she said, I left the church. I'm like, oh my gosh, I knew it. Finally. It was like, it's been 20 years. And, when I first told her, I said, she was the first person I had told. And I'm like, I'm going to be recently after she was like, Joe, the thing is, I don't feel that way about you. And I'm like, feel what way? And she's like, I'm not attracted to you. I don't want. And I'm like, and I remember telling her once, I said, do you realize I would put you on a pedestal every day? Do you realize I would worship you? Do you realize I would make you I would make you a queen and a princess and a goddess in my life? Do you realize that? And she's like, ew. I was like, ew. And she's like, I don't want to be on anybody's pedestal. I don't want that responsibility. She's like, do you know me? Do you think I want to be somebody's moral perfection, somebody's angel? Ew, gross. I don't want anything to do with that. She's like, honestly, maybe that's part of why I just don't feel that way about you. Broke my heart. I mean, just broke my heart. but more not because I lost her as much, love her as much as I do, and I love her to this day. She's a dear, kind woman, a lovely person. I was broken up about the story. It's like, but the knight in shining armor and the the sinner and the the redemption.
It was actually going to be a dual savior. You were going to save her, and she was going to save you at the same time.
Perfect. It's like a novel. It's like if Stephanie Meyer stopped pretending, start writing about vampires and started writing romance novels about Mormons like her. This was our Twilight, right?
This is the love story among all love stories that ends in a strange way. How could it have that ending? We must not live in Hollywood, I guess.
Right. And it wasn't long before then I finally accepted that. And then a girl that I had dated in high school and had intended on marrying one day came back into my life. Very quickly, we hit it off, and it was right back to the races. And once again, she
it's a little bit easier to love someone that loves you back.
Yeah, and is attracted to me. And is in love with the story as much as I was, every bit as much as I was. Everything that this first girl didn't want with me, this other girl definitely did. Everything.
Did you think someday, if you were righteous enough, they both would be your wives in heaven?
I have to think on that.
That God would reward you for being such a good Mormon. It
would be such a good story if that were true. No, I definitely, when I was dating the second gal I was engaged to, in the book I call her Annie, so we'll make it that we'll call her that, so I don't have to keep using her pronouns. Annie and I definitely had the thought several times that if I become a polygamist in the next life, if that thing happens to us and we get to sad Mormon heaven, she's going to not be sad because she likes girls, and having more girls around, more women around, is just all the better for her. We could really everybody's supposed to say, I wouldn't do it. I can't keep one wife. I can't keep one peaceful household with one wife, that's what you're supposed to say. But I'm like, I don't know, with Annie, we could do it. We could pull it off.
Right. Sister wives are going to enjoy each other, right? Because
and they're going to share the burden.
They're going to share the burden. They're going to share the mission statement. They're going to remember that they were gods in embryo from fire to come into earth.
Gods in embryo.
There's going to be no jealousy. Why would anybody be jealous as a celestial being? It can't happen.
That's Zion right there, man. That's Zion. Yeah. That's a kingdom of God right there. I'm like, this makes total sense.
So then I end up getting married, and do you get?
Nope.
I mean,
we got engaged.
Okay.
To the second girl, we got engaged, and we're like, this is it. Let's not screw around. We'll definitely fall into sin. So let's get married right away, as soon as possible. My parents were out of town at the time, and they're like, they're like, what is this about? You're getting engaged? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to marry Annie. It was meant to be. It was always meant to be. What about this other girl? She doesn't want me. So it's Annie. Obviously, this is God telling me it's Annie. And then to make sure that we didn't mess up, I took her home to California, and on my way to where her parents lived. And then it's like, okay, we're going to get physical separation here until the wedding. And then on my way back, I realized I did it again. I fell in love with the story about the redemption of her and the redemption of me and the great plan of God. And I broke her, fresh off of getting my heart broken by girl number one. Got my heart broken by girl. I went around, broke her heart, broke Annie's heart, and I feel guilty about it.
Did you do like a checklist, or did you just say, I don't want to make that one big mistake again? Or did you evaluate like Benjamin Franklin would have done? He would have written the positive things and the negative things and balanced them out.
Pro con Annie. That's a question. I don't think so. I think that, but that's a good question. No, it's on the drive back. I realized I thought to myself, Joe, you fall in love with stories more than you fall in love with people.
Okay.
That's why. That's why, when I was a kid, I became obsessed with Star Wars. I could go grab my.
So were you in love with Princess Leia?
Oh my God. Are you kidding me right now? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, here it is. Ha. Okay. I told you that I paint now. This one's called Daughter of Alderaan.
There you go.
So a little infatuated with Leia Organa Solo. Yes.
So
Leia
were you in love with Carrie Fisher enough to go watch her in another movie called Shampoo?
I never did see that one.
So,
I saw Carrie Fisher every chance I got.
because Shampoo was R-rated and
Star
Wars was PG, right? So
I'd have to. I'm surprised I had never heard of that. I used to watch rated R movies that they had Carrie Fisher in them.
So get your Carrie Fisher jollies up and go look up Shampoo.
Oh, this is my evening now. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it sexy? Please tell me it's Return of the Jedi sexy.
Yeah. So anyhow, so did you ever get married?
I did get married. Yes. I broke Annie's heart, but it was the transition, the faith transition there was when I then went back to girl number one, who now we were friends, and I was happy with us being friends. We'd gotten past that, and I told her one night, I said, I don't think I believe in the church, and I haven't since my mission. And she, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. And she's like, what do you mean you don't believe in the church? You're an RM. You did all this. We were going to get, you wanted to marry me. You wanted to marry Annie. You wanted an eternal family. You wanted all this. And I'm like, and all the time I felt super guilty about it. But the truth is I stopped believing in Joseph Smith on my mission. And I stopped believing in God, frankly. And this, falling in love with the story of the redemption of us, you and me and her and me and all the children of humanity, and this idea of God forgiving us of our sins and taking us home again. I was more in love with that. I was never in love with anything but the story, like a movie, because I decided when I was 14 also that I was going to be the next George Lucas. I was going to make movies. I've been a professional failed filmmaker now for over 30 years. And because I've been chasing chasing stories. And I realized I wasn't getting anything I wanted out of dating Mormon girls. I decided I wasn't getting anything out of dating women at all at the time. I just wanted out of the game altogether until I could sort out my feelings, not about women. Turns out I still do like women, but about God and about the church and about sex and about marriage and about family and everything suddenly was deconstructed as soon as I was able to admit I didn't believe in God anymore. And so I moved out of my parents' house. I got my own apartment. And I at the time I dropped out of college. I was in film school. I went to Scottsdale Community College. I was like a couple of credits shy of my acting and directing track when a friend of mine and I had lunch, and I said, a friend of mine who had recently done a music video for some big band. I don't even remember who it was now. It's like My Chemical Romance. No, it's before that, I think. Anyway, so he's like, and I said, where should I go after I finish my degree in film here at SEC? And he said, honestly, Joe, don't waste another dollar on film school. He's like, it will get you nowhere. He's like, I did the whole thing, graduated from SEC, went out to UCLA, got my degree there, spent over $100,000 finishing my degree in California. And not a person has asked me to see any of my films from film school. Not a person has asked to see my degree. He's like, the sooner you can just get to working, the better. So it's like
portfolio going.
That's right.
Do something and show people what you did, and they'll hire you.
That's right. in this field, I mean, of course, it's not going to be great if you're going to be a heart surgeon, but if you're going to be, a videographer and / filmmaker, that was the key.
I suppose for some people, you will make connections at school, and you'll have, you'll learn some of the language better. The skills will help you, but not the paper, is what he's basically saying. And you had the skills.
In 1977, sure. In the 1970s, maybe even the 1980s. By the years 2000, honestly, film school's a waste of time, in my opinion. I hate to say it, but it's true. And most of what I learned about filmmaking, I learned from working in video production. I mean, I learned a lot in film school, and SEC was the best school to go to, honestly. I still tell people, if you can get to Arizona and go, I don't know if their film program's any good anymore. But then while I was there, I discovered, to get into the acting and directing track, so you can become George Lucas, you had to take a class in acting. You had to take like 3 courses in acting. And the acting 101 course is not a film course. It's a theater course, and discovered something I had not realized in all my life. I loved theater. And I was like, and I actually segued for a couple of years there during the whole Annie experience into theater. I got into the Southwest Shakespeare Conservatory and did conservatory. Loved that. Had a life transforming experience. All of this time while finally being able to living on my own and being able to say to people for the first time, I used to be Mormon, but now I'm an atheist. And I felt more at peace than I had ever been in all my life. And I was like, there's this shadow of Elder Rollins that I had lived under all my teenage years. And then there was the Joe Rollins emerging from it, the boy that got forgotten about, who had all these doubts, the Korihor boy who had all these doubts about the church, but finally allowed to flourish from in this artistic creative venue. And I flourished. I became more myself.
The demon inside you was just you.
That's right. That's right. It was me trying to follow after the third of the host of heaven, who followed after my dear Lord, the Prince of Darkness at Hellfire Agency. The Hellfire Agency was already formulating. So yeah. From there, it was from there that I finally decided that I was not going to chase Mormon girls anymore. I was not going to try for an eternal family. And then I was going, and then I said, but I am going to try and find a girlfriend. This is 2005. I dropped out of school, had my own apartment, everything. I had an apartment with my best friend, Brian, who I miss very, very much. And I found out that BNL, my favorite band, was coming once around. I'd seen them several times. They were on, that's Bare Naked Ladies, if you don't know, BNL. And they were doing a tour down in Tucson. They were coming back for the Bare Naked, for the Holidays tour, as it was called. And I bought 2 tickets for it. And I said, I am going to have a girlfriend by Christmas. And I'm going to take a girl on a sex trip down to Tucson. We're going to go see Bare Naked Ladies together. And then we're going to go and we're going to get freaky. And I'm like, I'm going to find a girl. I'm going to find a girl. And so that was in October 10th, 2005. I was at a birthday party for my sister, and I walked in, and the most gorgeous Mormon girl I had ever seen in my life was sitting on the couch in my sister's house, in my other sister's house, who was hosting the party. And long story short, I lamented that this was a Mormon girl. I said, I told my roommate that night, I said, I don't date Mormon girls. It's just, I'm not out to break anybody's heart, get my heart broken, and I'm not out to ruin this poor girl's life. And he's like, but it sounds like she really made an impression on you. And she did. We flirted all night. We, and really hit it off. Long story short, 2 months later, just about the most Mormon thing I ever did after I was an atheist. I told her up front, like, I don't believe in the church. I'm still a member of the church. I don't believe in Joseph Smith. I don't believe in God. And I don't believe in eternal families, and I'm not after one. And I don't think I don't think it's possible. And I'm like, so, I mean, I'm not, I'm not
your man.
That's right. If you're looking for your priesthood holder, he's not in this person. And she's like, right. She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, I do. Trust me. This is a whole journey for me. And she said, but you did go on a mission. You are an RM. And I'm like, yeah. Did you catch the atheist thing? I don't believe in God. And she's like, yeah, but you did go on a mission. Yeah. I got the shining armor. I keep it over there in the closet.
You check the boxes.
60 days later, December 10th, 2005, we were married in a little shotgun wedding in a singles ward chapel there in Mesa. I guess technically it was in Tempe. And
by the bishop of the ward or something.
Yep, by the bishop of the ward, who did this all the time, because everybody in the singles ward, they're all sinning, man. It's all the sin next to murder, those singles wards. And
just to make them honest.
Right.
We'll say.
Right. He had a whole spiel about it. It was very short.
Shotgun weddings.
Right. Mormon shotgun weddings, the decorations at our wedding were ivy that her mom had pulled out of her garage, but she kept for Easter Sunday. It's like, oh, we'll put this up here. The dress was borrowed from her sister. We realized she didn't have white shoes.
Shotgun and shoestring.
Yep. We bought shoes the night before the wedding where we were together. We were sleeping together the whole time. Did I make that clear? And the night before the wedding, she said, I just really don't have any shoes that will go with this dress, and anything I wear is going to be ugly. We tried to find white shoes at the last minute. We couldn't find anything. And who shows up on my doorstep but girl number one, the girl I almost got to marry me. And who does she have in tow there with her, showing up out of the blue? But Annie. Hi. Yeah. She's like, some word on the street is your bride doesn't have white shoes. And I'm like, no. And she's like, let's get it. And so together we figured out how to get fabric and glue it onto these shoes so that my bride would have white shoes.
There wasn't even a Facebook group called Joe's Bride Needs Shoes or anything like that.
I guess at that point, if there was such a thing as Facebook, we could have had a Facebook group. This is 2005. So, but yeah. Yeah. And both those girls were at my wedding, and it was a miracle. Wedding. It was, well, no, it wasn't. There are no miracles, but it was a beautiful thing. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And then we went to the Bare Naked Ladies concert the next night. And I'm like, oh, honey, guess what? We're going on a honeymoon.
Came true.
That's right. I'm going to get a girl for a wild sex trip. I didn't know the wild sex trip was a honeymoon.
Right.
19 years later, this December, married to that same girl, 3 beautiful children, all of them with raging autism, all of them artists, and more atheists than ever, and a nihilist and a pessimist, and totally ecstatic about it, and totally healing from it.
But actually, so I don't remember. I guess we were talking maybe, but you have an idea for a podcast that we could do about nihilism. Like you have the advice, or what would you say?
So I've been thinking for a while about this.
You just tease it. We'll just tease it, and we'll do a show soon about it.
I've been seeing a lot of posts of people posting, and there's even a podcast about it. I forget the girl name, but there's a podcast all about dealing with your nihilism after leaving the Mormon church. That there's a lot of people who experience what I experienced when I became an atheist, which was that I all of a sudden, without God in your life, it made sense that there was no God. But without God, with the loss of God came the loss of purpose. And, there's a whole book on this.
Is it Brittany Hartley?
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And what's her podcast called?
Yeah, I can't remember.
We'll tease it. We'll put it in the notes.
It'll be in the show notes in the description. Yeah,
but I remember
amazing.
So I heard her talking about that recently, like the last year or two, and I heard Kara Burrell talked a little bit about it on Nuance Ho. Several Mormon Stories episodes, as you know, have been all about this. That if it turns out that nothing means anything objectively, then what reason does a person have to go on? How do you get yourself out of bed in the morning? Stephen Pinecker and I had this conversation recently on Mormon Book Reviews, and I gave him just a quick glimpse of it. And I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to tease this a little bit. I tell him, you think about this, your whole world is not real when you think about it. It's like the Matrix, right? Just like Neo inside the Matrix, everything is fed into your brain through the ports in your nervous system. And you think in your head that you experience the world around you directly. You do not. And I told him, I said, you think about this. I learned this from Sam Harris, actually, that there's a space of time, a lag between when light strikes your eye and travels up your optic nerve into your brain. And there's another one, another space of time for sound traveling from your inner ear to your brain. Okay, or the signal of the vibration of sound to your brain. And they're not the same unit of time. And yet you're looking at me right now and you're listening to my voice and you're seeing my lips move and they seem to be synchronized. What the heck is causing that? You don't realize this, but your brain has been reconstructing the whole world for you all your life. And we just don't think about it. And the person who really turned me on to this, the philosophy that helped me to finally resolve my existential crisis and to learn to be at peace with myself and my existence and the possibility of my choosing to make my own quietus, as Hamlet would say, and also learning to express myself in a world that had no meaning, was a man, but a brilliant, and I am 100% convinced, autistic man named Arthur Schopenhauer. And he, in The World as Will and Idea, I mean, laid out the most beautiful, brilliant understanding of what this is. That basically when you see a magic trick in your brain, and you know in your brain that's an illusion, the magician knows how to do something, some sleight of hand.
That elephant couldn't possibly have come out of that hat.
That's right. Exactly.
You know that tricks,
but why is it fun to watch a magic trick happen? Because when that is constructed inside your brain, because you don't know the trick, you don't know how it's done. Or as Job from Arrested Development would say, the trick is something a whore does for money, Michael. This is an illusion. Then you don't know how the illusion is done in your brain. When the world that you build in your brain, it's magic. That's how it works.
And we must get some brain drugs from that.
Oh, for sure.
Our brain likes to be illusioned. I was going to say
that's
trick.
Right.
It's not a trick.
Well, maybe it is. But are we the John? Or are we? Anyways. So the but
we'll do a whole show about that. We won't show that book in the bottom of this show, but when we do the other show, we'll talk about the book and we'll because I've been saying sort of like there's good nihilists and bad nihilists. The bad nihilists say, oh, all is worthless. Might as well either wreak havoc or kill myself because nothing's worth it anymore. Or there's a good nihilist that says there's no intrinsic meaning in anything, but I can make meaning because I'm an amazing human being that has synapses and things that are happening. And either it's an illusion that I have decision-making processes where I can choose things, or it's actually happening, but I can sort of create meaning because I have a brain.
Right. And because that is subjective, which is to say, and I always try to nail this down, because like when you talk about morality, this comes up again, subjective versus objective morality. People who say, if you don't believe objective morality exists, you're a murderer. That's all there is to it. You anything Hitler would do, you would do, even though Hitler was a fairly, I don't know about devout, but he was a fairly firmly believing Catholic. So I miss us with that. But but here's the thing is that when you see this world as it is built in your mind, understanding, right? You can really begin to realize if it matters to me, then it matters. It's all that matters. when we say subjective means that, oh, human beings are building it, can come up, we just make it up. That's dismissed too easily. You make up everything. I don't think, and people do. It's like in the movie in The Matrix, Neo meets a little boy while he's waiting to see the Oracle. And the little boy shows him how he can bend spoons with his mind, and he gives it to him to do it. And Neo's like, I can't. And the little boy says to him, don't try to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Just realize the truth. Realize the truth. And he says, there is no spoon. There's only yourself. And then, and that's how he learns how to do it. I'm like, holy crap, man. This is the Wachowski sisters now telling us something we didn't, something so profound. This could walk right out of the World as Will and Idea. It could walk right out of the myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, which is another brilliant thing. It really goes Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Camus. If you get stuck at Nietzsche, keep going. Camus, get to Camus.
I got stuck at Dr. Seuss is where I got stuck. I've been rereading all the Dr. Seuss novels. We'll call them novels.
Oh, we'll be generous to Dr.
That's
Seuss.
right. I had 4 kids. They all got their Dr. Seuss-isms.
Beautiful.
So one thing I just realized, we haven't talked about ExmoJoe. How does ExmoJoe come out? So this is longer than normal, but I'm loving it. And now so we've teased for over an hour, ExmoJoe, and now we're going to meet ExmoJoe. Welcome to the show.
Sure. Hi. Welcome back.
So when did you first think of TikTok and creation that way?
I'll tell you. I'll get into a little bit of the story of what I don't think I've ever really been public about this, but I've not been hiding it. Well, I've talked about it a little bit, but so about 7 years ago, my wife, who I love dearly, we're still together and very happy, and I broached the subject of polyamory, that maybe we should try the open marriage thing. And I'd like to say it's been entirely healthy, but of course that's a kind of transition that was difficult. It's going to be difficult no matter who it is, how you do it.
That's right. Can you give me your wife's number after the show? No,
yeah, sure. I'll give it to you. I can't promise you she'll answer. But it was around, as a matter of fact, I've started recording a series. I don't want to say too much of it, but I started recording a series for Hellfire Agency, my podcast, called ExmoNogamy, where I just talk to people who are ex-Mormons who became non-monogamists, or we say ENM, or ethical non-monogamy. There are other terms. There's a whole bunch.
No flaming swords are involved.
No, not so far. Not needed. You can be much more honest about it.
Although some people might think that a flaming sword might be some sort of venereal disease.
Oh, that always happens. That will happen. I'll say this much. You discover when you become an ethical non-monogamist in Utah that there is a season that is known in the polyamory world as chlamydia season. And everybody in the community, you got to keep your head down, or you wind up going to get antibiotics. That's all. But thank goodness for antibiotics. But anyways, people could be more careful. So around, it was 2019. I think it was before the pandemic, or the big P, whatever we call it. I don't know how safe that word is on YouTube. I started dating a much younger woman she's like, will you follow me on TikTok? And I looked at her and I'm like, oh, honey, you don't get me, do you? I know what I look like. Okay. But I am an old man. I was born in 1980. When I was born, you couldn't buy a VCR. And you kids, your generation doesn't know what that is. And
So you knew what TikTok was.
I knew I had heard of it.
But you have to be on TikTok in order to follow somebody on TikTok.
Correct. That I learned.
That's the message, right?
Right. And so I'm like, if I want to look at the things people look at on TikTok, I could go pick up a magazine, because then it all just like girls dancing in mini skirts and doing dances and things. And she's like, well, I create Disney themed content. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
So okay. You're like, I'm in.
I'm like, if you want me to follow you, I will create an account and I will follow you on TikTok. And then I discovered that on TikTok, they have TikTok lives, or live broadcasts, right? And on these live broadcasts, there are people who follow politics. And if you have enough followers, you can get on and argue with strangers on the internet over politics. And oh boy, this autism noodle who likes to argue suddenly had a home. And in the midst of that, I started doing a lot of debates about abortion and abortion rights, and about, leftism and economics, about polyamory, and then suddenly about Mormonism and about Christianity and about religion. And I was hooked, man. I became pretty popular. I've got tons of followers. I got up to like 2,000 followers. And I was like, man, I'm really blowing and going. It's like, this is like the core horror argument. This is long after I'd written the core horror argument, which almost nobody bought. And, and I'm like, this is like core horror living. I'm like core horror, and like I am core horror now on TikTok, right? And then I realized it'd become a toxic habit for me to go in and argue with conservatives on the internet. And I needed to relax. And then that girl and I had stopped dating anyways. She moved away. And so it was around that time that I said, it was 2023, Sound of Freedom came out in theaters. And I have followed the Tim Ballard story for about at least 5 years. And since Lynn Packer was covering it, right? And I was like, I cannot believe this. This movie's taking off, blowing, going. People think this guy is a hero, Tim Ballard, and he is a scoundrel. He is a filthy, awful person, and everything. There's the worst things about Joseph Smith and more. And it's like, I can't believe this. It's like, and so I made a video exposing Sound of Freedom on TikTok. And I said, here's the thing. I know how to do TikTok. Take a serious subject, sure, but make it light, make it airy, make it funny. And then I made this video, and I can share it with you if you want. I can show you. I have it pulled up on my computer here. But sure. Should we do that?
Yeah. So at the bottom is the present screen. I mean, the present thing. You know how to do
I'm
that.
seasoned. I'm seasoned, baby.
I barely know how to press buttons. and usually I press the wrong buttons. Do I have to bring it on, or can you do it?
You bring it. That's a good question. Look, you manage it. So this is ExmoJoe. This is Oh No ExmoJoe on TikTok. People who want to follow it. I have one series called Hillsdale Family Values. I decided I got fairly close. I don't want to say terribly close. That's too much to say. But there was a time when I was really close to, I was somewhat close to Jeremy Reynolds, the author of the CES letter. And he and I had coffee here in American Fork one time. And he's like, what are we doing wrong? He didn't say it quite like that, but it was like that. We were just got together like, what are we doing wrong? I mean, like, you've written the core horror argument. I've written the CES letter. I mean, shouldn't we be like Sons of Perdition, killing it, making money, doing all kinds of, killing it on the internet?
Yeah. Filthy rich is what you need to be.
Well, I mean, that's what the Book of Mormon promises. I
mean, who sells their soul to Satan for like $37 a day?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I said, here's the thing, man. We're fishing in too shallow a pool with the Mormon crowd. And I think I don't want to speak for Jeremy, but he seemed convinced of that too. I'm like, look, we need to be able to broaden our audience. And so it was about then that I said, here is my chance. I'm not just going to talk to Mormons and progressive Mormons, ex-Mormons, transitioning Mormons. I'm going to talk about conservatism writ large by exposing this Mormon and everything that's wrong with him. And I made this TikTok, which, as you can see, has 630,000 views. That's not a lot compared to, cute people dancing, TikTok dances. But for me, I'd never gotten that kind of reaction. And it's not, and that's not even my biggest video, but this is where it really blew up. Do you hear that?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you recognize this guy? That's Tim Ballard. He's the guy that the movie The Sound of Freedom is about. And he's sitting in front of this whiteboard full of God knows what. This is his official account. Tim, do you not know what Instagram is for? Here's another one of him sitting in front of a blank whiteboard. Come on, Tim. The reason why he's making pictures of him in front of whiteboards and publishing them to Instagram is because he knows people are looking up Tim Ballard's secret whiteboard meeting and getting this. Do you like the special effects? Magic. Okay, this Mormon herbal tea is super scalding hot. In 2019, a bunch of Tim Ballard's rich donors said, wait, we've given you millions and millions of dollars to rescue children from trafficking. And now we're hearing that's maybe not where the money's going. What's going on? To allay their fears, Tim drew this on the whiteboard. And you guys, it's like super culty and creepy. You see this box right here says OUR? That's Operation Underground Railroad. It's only one of the companies that he drew out on this board. Dude, how many companies does one guy who works in a nonprofit business rescuing people from trafficking need? Well, let's dig into it a little bit. Okay, so first I'll point out that there's these two things written in blue over here. It says 1, awareness, 2, funding. Okay, if you're going to make money, you got to first make people aware of what you're doing and then raise the money. Okay, no problem. You notice these three organizations, of which Operation Underground Railroad is only one, right underneath it that says Sizzle. So that's awareness. And then underneath you see it says 501c3. That means it's a nonprofit company. You see the arrows? That's funding. Not funding for Operation Underground Railroad. Funding for Tim and members of his family. Shall we dial up the creepy a little bit more? You'll notice that this says orphanage in Haiti. That refers to an orphanage that OUR runs in Haiti, where they run an adoption ring connected to the Mormon church. Look, everybody wants orphans to find a family if they can. In Haiti, these Christian adoption rings, they pocket the money. It's a big business. Notice that it says here, take Sizzle of the rescue, lead them to the covenant. And then step by step, including OUR, Operation Underground Railroad. Guys, how much do you actually want to know?
So the answer to that question was a lot, because I went on and I made another video here and I made another video here. And then this is a video about that really toxic Mormon creator. Then I made this one about Gardy Marty and how they didn't find Gardy Marty. And that's the same video. It was that video and or this video where I started exposing how the the Ed Smart connection, which of course you know a lot about, how Ed Smart was working for Tim Ballard, that's Elizabeth Smart's father, and it was on the mission to Haiti and Dominican Republic, where they took the psychic Janet Russin to try and rescue Gardy Marty and weren't able to actually do it. And then, I just got tons of people messaging me going, are you going to come out with a podcast? Because you can't tell this whole story in like 3 minutes. At the time, I was limited to 3 minutes. And they're like, this is super fascinating. You got to blow this whole thing apart. I'm like, at this point, I'm mainly just reporting what Lynn Packer's been reporting on for years now, right?
Right.
So then I made more and more and more and realized people were really interested in this Tim Ballard thing. Then I made this one. You notice that the views here say 1.4 million on this video, and realized I didn't have to be constrained to Mormon content, right? Really, already this is getting out of the Mormon world, just exclusive Mormon world. I said, this is another story that I've always been interested in that is just wild. Should I play the video? It's only 3 minutes.
Yeah, let's play the video. I remember seeing Hillsdale, and I was thinking, is that related to some other show? Right here, Hillsdale. I know I've heard that word before, and of course, I probably in my Republican days, got a lot of mail from Hillsdale, right?
Oh, that's very possible. So, recovering Republican like me, I feel for you, Gene.
That's right.
Much love to you, my friend. Yeah, let's watch this one. Let's see how long it is. Sorry.
Does this look like an all-American scandal to you? Meet our new friend Lisa Roche. That's apparently how you spell Lisa. And here she is with her father-in-law, George Roche III. Harumph, harumph, harumph. He was president of the very conservative Christian Hillsdale College in Michigan, where Lisa was found dead. Okay, cut that last part out and go back. Don't let it be weird that they're sharing a book cover together. What happened is that George used to write conservative books, free market economics, family values, Judeo-Christian, blah, blah, blah. And Lisa would do the research. In fact, there at Hillsdale College, they actually had offices about 30 feet from each other. Because, family. Lisa was married to his son, George Roche IV. That's harumph, 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 harumph. People used to call him Ivy, like the Roman numeral for 4. Why would I make that up? And she was the mother to George III's grandson, George Roche V. Okay, at some point it's just ridiculous. And she used to book high-profile guests for their seminars, people like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Whoa. I mean, pretty much as close to conservative royalty as you can get. They all lived there at Hillsdale's very swanky establishment, where there was a gazebo where Lisa used to go and think. And one day, in 1999, she pulled out a .357 Magnum and shuffled off this mortal coil. Damn. Ivy found her like that and called the police, who later told reporters that it was strange how calm he was. In fact, on the way to give his statement at the station, he asked them if he could stop off at Burger King. I mean, how are you supposed to act? I don't know. Have it your way, I guess. But lest you suspect foul play, my friends, just keep in mind that George IV had a really rough day. Why, just before this, his father had collapsed from an adverse reaction to his insulin and rushed off to the hospital. Now, George III had a new wife he was still in the honeymoon phase with. It was a scandal. She was only 10 years older than Lisa. When the new bride invited everybody out to his bedside at the hospital, Lisa decided that it was the opportune moment to inform everyone that over the 21 years she'd been married to George IV, wait for it, she'd been fucking George III. You dirty dog. What would Jesus do? Keep your genes in your jeans. Well, not surprisingly, the trustees decided that Mr. Stupp, the daughter-in-law, should maybe retire. You think? And they replaced him with this horse's ass, Larry Arnn, and that's where the real scandal at Hillsdale begins.
And boy, did it. And that actually, believe it or not, is the story that really caused, Sound of Freedom. I thought, man, I'd gotten a gold mine. I went from like 2,000 followers on TikTok to 17,000 followers on TikTok in less than a week. And then I after I had really felt like, yeah, I've done the Sound of Freedom thing to death. But still with like people going, there's got to be a podcast. I got to know more about this story. And I'm like, I just can only tell so much in 3 minutes, guys. So
that was 1 year and 2 months ago.
Yeah. And then then I started this series about Hillsdale and getting further into like the theory about, of all the connections of Hillsdale and this Roche family and Lisa and all this, including the questions about did Lisa really die by suicide? Did she, did Ivy kill her? But there's all this. There's 20 years of history of people going around on what actually happened here. Meanwhile, there's all of this scandal going on with, the takeover of Larry Arnn and how the school, was working hard to make sure that they didn't have to adhere to standards of affirmative action, and so forth. And so it's like, it just kept good. It keeps giving and giving that story, which I still haven't even had time to start on Hellfire Agency about that. So, yeah. And so that's, yeah. So I have 3 series on my podcast I've been trying to get off the ground. The one that's people probably know me best for is I call it Blood Atonement, which is stories about Ted Bundy. And I can show you that. I have more content about Ted Bundy anyways, but yeah.
And then I think we'll do another show and talk about your podcast as well. And we'll skip the 5 minutes of your Mormon story for that one.
Oh, okay. Because we already did more than an hour and a half of that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can show you more, but
you're turning me into John DeLynn here, I think.
You should start doing 6-hour podcasts and everything.
Yeah.
But no, I got to go to bed, man.
That's right.
But I mean, okay. So that's I mean, maybe we'll keep it to here unless you really want to see more. But
I'll remove this from the screen, I think, if I press the right button.
Yep.
And then we go back on. And then
I mean, now people know me about the Ted Bundy stuff mostly. People on YouTube are hearing about the Ted Bundy stuff. But I really started with Sound of Freedom and Tim Ballard and Hillsdale, the whole Hillsdale scandal on TikTok. And that's the rest, as they say, is history. It was when people started saying to me, people started making comments about like that George Roach video. They started quoting Mel Brooks. That's how I knew I got my guns, because there's a line in Blazing Saddles where he goes, "Hey, I didn't get a harumph out of that guy." And so it's like, is anybody going to say it? I didn't get a harumph out of that guy. And they're like, I had like a dozen people leaving the comment. I'm sitting here waiting on my 5 harumphs. I was robbed of 5 harumphs.
There you go.
And so people started saying, "Joe, you got to have a podcast." And so so most people started saying, "Joe, you got to have a podcast." Then all of the Mormons and QAnon people who found my content started leaving the comment, I hope you love being in hell. I hope that the devil, loves all the work you're doing for him. You're probably an atheist.
You probably are willing to maybe do like $1,000 reward, or if I don't know how you can, make this happen, but how about $1 trillion reward if somebody uses their priesthood power to smite you so that you don't talk anymore? Right? You have to stay alive. They have to use the priesthood power, and they have to say, "You no longer can talk where people can hear you."
Maybe that's in my future, man.
And
maybe that's
to make the reward, worth it. The $1 trillion is going to be when they get to heaven. So if they can do that to you on earth, they get $1 trillion in heaven. Yeah.
All the trillions of dollars. I'll tell you this, which of course you would get much use out of in Jesus's heaven, out of all those dollars. But no, but I'll say this was just ahead of time in case that does happen. In case I do get Korah Horde, how would you know I wasn't faking it? Even Korah Horde in the story, and part of the story he can't hear. In the other part of the story, he can't speak, but he can hear. And then the other part of the story, it seems implied he can neither speak nor hear. And I call it the out to lunch theory. I've talked about this on other programs too. I'm like, basically what happens is this. I've known this. This is what I've thought from the first, since I was a wee lad, and I found Korah Horde, is that is that obviously Joseph Smith was getting hungry. Whoever was writing this story, you get hungry, you get hypoglycemic, and you start to lose the plot. You start to lose your track of thought. That's what I think was happening with Joseph Smith. I've been maintaining that for 30 years, and nobody's managed to give me an argument how it's not plausible. But here's the thing that's wild about that is, if Korihor wins the argument, and all of this is constructed inside the brain of a human being, who is that human being, and why does Korihor win the argument? And I was around the time when I wrote the Korihor argument that really fleshed out. It's like, there's even a world where I can come to peace with Joseph Smith, where I look at this and I realize, if I really believe that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon, and I have my doubts, because it's either Joseph Smith or it's Oliver Cowdery. I think if it's not Solomon Spaulding, and if it's not Sidney Rigdon, and if it's not blah 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 blah, blah, right?
And I don't know if anybody ever has this theory, but you know who we almost know nothing about for being an early church leader? Hiram Smith. For being the number 2 guy. What do you know about Hiram Smith? Where is he quoted? What?
They're very close, and he's the first martyr of the church. And that's it. In spite of the significant role he plays actually in the Nauvoo Expositor and the whole fallout from the Nauvoo Expositor, in spite of the fact that he went to Dartmouth College, like you said, and he was a man who was learned. Well, what little time he could get it, he was book learned. And so I brought this up when I was talking about, because Jacob Hansen plays this old Hugh Nibley game about Joseph Smith was a simple farm boy who couldn't even write his name or some shit like that. Sorry for swearing on your program, but I say, look, here's the thing, because he brings this up to Trent Horn in his debate with him, and he says, Trent Horn says, all of these things that you're talking about that Joseph Smith couldn't have had access to when he wrote the Book of Mormon, all of them were published at the time. And Jacob pulls them out. Yeah, he's like, yeah, show me the proof that he had those books. And I went, wait a minute, that's arguing from silence. That's an argument from silence. That's illogical. I'm like, point it out. Say, Trent Horn, turn around to him right now and say, you show me your photograph of Joseph Smith's bookshelf and I'll show you mine. It's not the point. The point is, it's plausibly true, because you want evidence that Joseph Smith took information from these published documents and put it out in the Book of Mormon. I got one great piece of evidence for you, the Book of Mormon, and done and done. And I'm like, how are you letting him get away with that? But anyways,
because that's what higher criticism does with the scraps of texts that existed in the world 300 AD, right, and beyond, and they can tell from the writings where the very first ones were and where some other people made up stuff, and so that stuff got left aside, and they can say these have like genealogies, right?
Correct.
Because this was written here, because it was written here, and there's a path. Correct. So you're saying the same thing. The Book of Mormon's here, and there's all these things that existed, and they find their way into it.
Beautiful. That's exactly right. Yeah. Oh, I love, if you like talking early Christian, I do so much reading. I tell people I am probably the only atheist whose favorite pastime is reading early Christianity and early Christian writings, because I just am so fascinated to how the Joseph Smith story started out with people like Polycarp and Saint Ignatius, and Irenaeus, get into the the Docetists and the Docetic, and now the Mormons are getting into it. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like the Ward Radio kids are getting into. They just did an episode a week ago on a document called The Ascension of Isaiah, and I'm sitting here going, do you know about the Ascension of Isaiah? The Ascension of Isaiah is one of the best pieces of evidence that early Christians believed that Jesus was not a man who was born on the earth. It's central to the narrative of what's called the Jesus mythicism movement, which is exactly like you were saying, going back to the documents and saying, okay, if we assume, and it is an assumption, that a Christian would not redact a gospel. They wouldn't take a gospel story of Jesus and say, that's crap. That's crap. I'm going to take it out. A Christian wouldn't do that. Then you look at then you get this order of how the gospels were written, and suddenly there's this other gospel that works into here, and it's called Evangelion. It's Marcion's gospel and the Marcionites. And that's a very curious thing, because when you look at Marcionites and you look at their gospel, it strikes you as very docetic. They didn't seem to be convinced that Jesus was a man, that he was a myth, that he was, or they wouldn't have used the word myth, that he was a god. And Isaiah, the ascension of Isaiah, proves that. And they talk about it now. They're like, this is the lost teachings of Isaiah that Nephi was talking about in the Book of Mormon. It is not. Any Christian or non-Christian scholar will tell you the ascension of Isaiah has nothing to do with the prophet Isaiah. It was invented and they attributed it to Isaiah. Isaiah is a character in it, but it's a myth. It's a myth, I think, from the 3rd century, if I'm off the top of my head. And it's like, if you get into the history of this and start saying, okay, we don't know all the gaps, but we can set up the plausibility of the order of how these things came to be, and construct a narrative of how Christianity came to be, in exactly the same way that we can build the narrative of how Mormonism came to be and how the Book of Mormon came about. And when you put that together, the story that you come up with is not guaranteed true. Sure, absolutely. As a critical thinker, I'm the first to say that. I'm not looking to prove, knock down what is true or not true. I want to know what's more probable, and I'm going to use the tools of critical thinking to do it. And when you do, you get a much more interesting story. For me, with Korihor, it is this. There's in psychology, they have the concept of an ego and of a superego. Your ego is you. That the part of you that defends and advocates for you. That's the part of you, your self-defense and your advocate. Your superego is the supervisor, is the conscience for that ego. It's the one that comes in, that should come in, and
super meaning above,
right? And exactly, and comes in and says, "Are you sure? Come on, we don't want to look stupid here. I mean, are you sure about this? Because if you really stop and think about it, that's where critical thinking should take over." Whoever wrote the story of Alma versus Korihor had a more fleshed out argument for Korihor, at least temporarily, probably at the longer pace, that said they had significant doubts about God, and more importantly, about the epistemology of how faith works and why you would expect somebody to have faith. And it included things like, people who want you to have faith, they're trying to glut themselves on the wealth of the people. Somebody came up with that. And okay, maybe it was Korihor in the ancient Americas. I don't believe that, but let's say that's one plausibility. The other plausibility is that it was Joseph Smith, or somebody else, or somebody in Joseph Smith's circle. And that just absolutely piques my curiosity. I mean, or piques my interest, I guess is the proper way to say that.
Right.
All of a sudden, it's like I'm getting to know a whole new Joseph Smith through my doubts of Joseph Smith, and one that I can almost forgive. And that's when I started to realize, you got a poor farm boy. Yes, that much we know. He was poor. And his family made a living, his whole family made a living at various times, engaging in folk magic and selling folk magic. He himself was prophesied basically by his parents and by his ancestors that this boy would come and that he was going to be a great prophet. He was going to become a great leader.
Now that could have been, Alvin.
Alvin.
And then when Alvin died, who's the second, right? Second in command, right?
Right. It should be Hiram, who went to Dartmouth. And then it's like, and then all of a sudden it wasn't Hiram, right?
But Joseph had so much charisma. It's almost like Moses and Aaron, right?
Right.
Moses gets all the glory, but Aaron did all the work.
Right. Or Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim is Manasseh's the older, but you got to switcheroo because this one, the younger one, is the one who chose the promise.
Moses was slow of speaking, right? He didn't think that people would believe him, but Aaron apparently had charisma. He had a way with words, and so that's sort of like Joseph is Hiram's Aaron, maybe, possibly.
I mean, I definitely think there was more to the Hiram story than people think, and I mean, but as far as Korihor, somebody wrote this story. I'm convinced it's fiction, but I can be proven wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Joe, are there any final words that you have for our audience, talking about how you became ExmoJoe, or what interesting things are in the future?
If you've gotten to this place, thank you for spending the last 2 hours with us. And I'm glad that you thought my story was interesting enough to stay to the end. I hope that you enjoy more of the content here, and that and I just want to thank you, Gene, and I want to thank Maven, and I want to thank all the people connected with your channel here for generously having me on. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I'll tell everybody I was on that program, and I cannot deny it. I know it. I know that God knowed it, so I know it's true.
That's right. Like, subscribe, share, Joe, do all those things, and the audience, you can do that too. Thanks everyone for watching. Everyone have a great rest of the year, and we'll see you in the next episode. Right? Bye-bye.